We're not here to read or to bring credible sources. We're here to speculate wildly and then be proven correct in the future. There's dangerous, where you're talking about things that actually the status quo does not enjoy hearing and will get you, shut down or banned or suppressed one way or another. And then there's safe dangerous, which is saying things that sound edgy, but only to people who don't realize that the cultural window, the Overton window, has shifted in such a way as to allow this conversation to take place.
America's the black site. It's fairly obvious if you put all those pieces together that it's I guess I understand why you wouldn't present this to the general public, because it's crazy.
We are being hypnotized by people like this. Newsreaders, politicians, teachers, lecturers. We are in a country and in a world that is being run by unbelievably sick people. The chasm between what we're told is going on and what is really going on is absolutely enormous.
Oh yeah, dude. There's some Nephilim shit.
It's like we all know what's going down, but no one's saying shit what happened to the home of the brave. These motherfuckers, they controlling us now, and no one's talking about how they made us fight and be slaves. And everybody's just walking around, head in the clouds, and won't awaken to a dead in the grave. But then it's too late, we need to be ready to raise up. Welcome to the end of days.
Everybody is slaves, only some are aware that the government releasing poison in the air.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Nephilim Death Squad. I am David Lee Corbo, a.k.a. The Raven. That is TopLobsta, the father of disinformation. Before we get into today's episode, I would like to remind all of our live viewers that this is a 30-minute preview only. Sometime around the 30-minute mark, we'll be going live exclusively to patreon.com/Nephilim Death Squad, where you can enjoy an ad-free viewing experience, early access to the episode, plus a little discount code off of merchandise from TopLobsta.com. And you can do all that for free at patreon.com/Nephilim Death Squad. If you sign up for whatever tier, including a 7-day free trial, you can absorb as much content as humanly possible and then get out of there before the billing cycle kicks in. But I'm willing to bet that you're going to want to stay, because it is a treasure trove of backlog content that we're struggling to try to get out. We record so much that we're getting piled up, or we're getting dogpiled in content.
Oh, it's been crazy.
Today, what's that?
It's been crazy. We're figuring it out. We're getting it out to you little by little, inch by inch. This is why it's taken us, 25 minutes to start this show, and freaking 2 weeks to get this talking point down and
which
packed.
People have already heard in very many ways, right? Like so a lot of people are going to hear some of the same stuff, but fleshed out a little bit more than you've heard on previous appearances, like the Occult Rejects, or like Quite Frankly TV we were just on recently, where we talked quite a bit about this topic, as well as our recent episode of Dangerous Retards with Clint Russell. So this is going to be a rehashing, but we just felt like we forced ourselves to do part one, and then afterwards we went and spilled all the beans everywhere. But we have to do part two, don't we? I suppose it's kind of wild too, because we never stop to think. We go, hey, we want to build something here. What should we do? And I go, well, let's record a lot more content. Let's hammer out content constantly, because I think that's a great way to grow, and people have a steady stream of entertaining and interesting topics. And then we completely forgot that there's another half to just recording.
We have to put it up to them. We have to show it to them after.
Yeah,
I don't want to do that.
I didn't think that we were going to have to do that. I thought we were just going to do it and that would be enough. But now we have to show you guys the content. So this is definitively part two. And it's actually tricky, because I don't remember what the hell we said in part one, because we've made the rounds and we've said this everywhere, to the point where even there's people in the comments that are like, whoa, why do they keep talking about this? And it's because you're listening to our appearance on the Occult Rejects. You're listening to the part one of the Telepathy tapes. You're listening to our appearance on Quite Frankly. You're listening to Dangerous. You're listening to all these different shows where we're rehashing the same thing. But also it's because I don't really have a lot of other stuff in my brain. I just
we have one thing. Literally, we have 2 or 3 narratives going on in our brain at any moment, and we just rehash them and repackage them to you, and you guys consume it. So thank you for keep on showing it up. But
look at Q. Q says this is old. This is not old, Q. This is new. We're here today in front of you.
This is actually pre-taped. He's right.
Oh, this is pre-taped. That's right.
Yeah. I think maybe a good place to start, because I don't remember what we left on. Episode 4 is what we left off on, right, with our last telepathy tapes, but I don't even remember what that was about. Since then, Ian Carroll's episode on the telepathy tapes was released to the general public, and we were able to watch it and review it, or at least I did. So we can talk a little bit about that and what he got right and what he missed, I suppose.
That's a great place to start because, like I said, one, I don't remember what we said. And number two, I do remember at least that we were anticipating in some way, shape, or form, Ian Carroll was going to make content about this topic. And it was important that we got it out before he did. What I can say to you guys is we did it. We did get the information out before Ian Carroll. And Top has a better handle on what he said. But from what you've discussed with me so far, we did a better job as well. It seems like he missed a lot, and I don't know if that's purposeful because much of what we're talking about is admittedly to some degree open to speculation. And if you're a guy that's worried about names and documents and things like that, well, that's simply not why we're here. We're not here to read or to bring credible sources. We're here to speculate wildly and then be proven correct in the future. That's kind of our MO.
Yeah.
And so what did he say, Top? What was his take on this whole thing?
His take was it was interesting. It was like if you watched, or if you looked at like this breakdown of what I have written here, and then you just gave the normie explanation for it, was his take. So very along the lines of what Kai Dickens is saying and doing about this higher consciousness that we need to have. It was all about, well, we need to have, love in our heart in order to ascend like this. He did touch on some CIA points, which were important, but just didn't go to the depth that needs to be gone for the public to really understand what is happening here.
Do you think that he is incapable of going to that depth because he lacks the information, or is he playing it safe because he does seem to do sort of a safe dangerous? And that's a terminology that Sam Tripoli throws around a lot. There's dangerous where you're talking about things that actually the status quo does not enjoy hearing and will get you shut down or banned or suppressed one way or another. And then there's safe dangerous, which is saying things that sound edgy but only to people who don't realize that the cultural window, the Overton window, has shifted in such a way as to like allow this conversation to take place. And I think in some cases it's happening so fast with Twitter being taken over by Elon. Then all of a sudden there's a lot of things that you can say that people don't realize yet that it's safe. So because of that, you might perceive what he's saying as dangerous when it's really not.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's about it's subjective for the listener. So I don't know him personally, but it's like we had that guy Dave Dissy on, or whatever his name was.
Right.
And he's presenting this information that's really compelling if you're a TikTok user. And it's like surface level compelling as far as surface level knowledge. I'm not accusing Ian of that. I think he has like much deeper knowledge than a lot of these things, than most of these other guys. But it's just like, it's for people to get into it. So I think that there's a place for it. Like people, it's hard. It's hard. If we just just rip this to somebody who wasn't paying attention, they'd be like, I can't even hear you right now. Like, I can't even understand what you're saying. The dental implants? What do you mean? Like voice to skull technology that entities they're communicating with is like, yeah, there's a lot going on. They can't hear it. So I guess a tentative approach is good, but there's still aspects to it that are missed. He brings up a point about maybe there's possibly black sites happening where they're taking autistic kids and and testing them and stuff. And I was like, no. America's the black site. It's fairly obvious if you put all those pieces together that it's. I guess I understand why you wouldn't present this to the general public because it's crazy.
Hold on a second, because people are suddenly presenting it. And I can't say that I'm not going to go on the route of they're stealing it from us. But Psalm 40 says, did you all see the Blurry Creatures episode on this?
I did see that. They did. I did not see it.
Tony Merkel just did an episode on this. Ian Carroll is now talking about this. And all I can say is that we got there a little bit ahead of the curve. But I suspect this is one of those situations where it's an idea whose time has come. I don't think that Ian Carroll necessarily is jacking our. I don't think that Tony Merkel is jacking our. I don't think that the Blue Creature guys are. But this topic is begging your people's subconscious mind, people who are looking for answers, looking for the truth. You're gonna stumble upon this thing. It's uncanny that we all stumbled upon it at the same time in the same way. I would, and not to toot our own horn, but I would say that we are at the cutting edge of it. We have more in the way of connections than other people are connecting right now.
Yeah, and it's all right there. It's so funny. Like Tripoli had on a guy, I forget his name, but I want to give him credit because it was a banger episode.
Oh
Gray,
yeah.
I forget. He was talking about Project Monarch. I think his name might be Gray Monarch. Look that up for me, David. It's one of the latest episodes. And even he brings up everybody's touching this subject from all sides. It's just being molested.
His name is just Gray. It says it's number 871, Dark Neuroscience, the Dragon Society, and the Project Monarch Whistleblower, an inside look with Gray. I haven't checked it out yet because I don't want it to. A lot of this stuff I'm not looking at because right now.
Let's give him some credit here because this guy does. So his name is Gray, but Gray Area Monarch. Go
very cool.
follow this dude. So he's a former NOC monarch turned whistleblower. His foundation is actually incredible. He has like a foundation for disclosure for people that are being harassed or targeted or who knows. But it's a way to report this stuff and it not get swept under the rug. Like he doesn't care about doesn't care about the consequences of bringing this forward. He is he's doing the dirty work, the hard work there. But he's on Tripoli's show and he's talking about these entities. He's talking about the Dragon Society, and which kind of refers to Lucifer, or at least these angelic beings that represent dragons, which might be seraphim. And then he even does this. It's kind of unfortunate during the episode. He touches on Indrija Puharj, and he knows a lot about him. And he's just running through it. He's like, he's the godfather of this, that, bam, bam, bam. And Sam Trippy's like, what? And then his connection drops. And he comes back. Yeah, it was weird. Comes back on, and then they're on the next subject. But I was like, oh man, keep
Dude,
telling
you know what that means for us? We're never going to look like we didn't steal this content. That's what that means. You know what I mean? Like we've been doing, despite the fact that we've done Puharj deep dives and we've done presentations on other people's shows, our own shows on him, and then connected it to this much larger picture. The timing, it's like I'm to the point now where I can see the more I try to worry about taking credit for this, the more it's going to slip away from us.
There is no
focus
credit
on that. There's no credit.
Because this guy's been doing so. Indrija Puharj, all the credit to this guy. I like him. He's been doing this since the 1950s. It's just
damn. How old is he? He's like 80.
He's dead. He's dead.
Yeah.
I thought you meant the stairs.
I thought you meant.
Oh no, this Gray. Guy. No, Gray. I don't know how old he is, but
it's like, damn, he's 80 years old, crushing. He's on Tripoli's. That's very cool.
He looks great for 80. No, but this guy, Puharj, been doing it. It's all up to him. I mean, it's all him. He's been doing this. It's just strange that nobody's really saying his name, and then we say his name, and then now I hear it everywhere. But it's also, I mean, it's been brought up lightly everywhere. Everybody is saying his name, but never really pointing at him as like the main culprit. And I really think that he is the main culprit. But so again, let's go back to this idea of an idea whose time has come, right?
Right.
We're talking, Blurry Creatures is on this. Everyone's on this. Everyone's talking about this.
Tinfoil Hat, Ian Carroll, everybody. Yeah.
Right. Well, in Indrija Puharj's book Beyond Telepathy, one of the very important topics or subjects that he's focusing on is something called plasma, psychic plasma. And chapter 10, chapter 11, chapter 12, and then the epilogue all talk about this theory, this idea of plasma. And basically, it explores the physical properties of psychic plasma. So shifting to a physics perspective, he theorizes how psychic plasma interacts with the physical world, possibly involving electromagnetic fields or quantum effects. It's a technical chapter that's aimed at bridging parapsychology and conventional science or materialism. So I really think that somebody starts talking about this in a just any kind of meaningful way. We probably could have been talking about this in my house and never recorded it, and it would have done this. It would have just been out there, gone, and now people will pick it up because it's a Jerry Marzinski idea, right? This is a
yeah.
How many ideas are actually our own? So was this idea was, again, how could we take credit for it? It was like these things that are floating around. We just kind of like,
what we never talked about? We never even talked about, speaking of the idea and it kind of floating around, somebody made a book with us.
Yeah,
And
yeah, that was fun.
dude, it was honestly great. I want to see if I could find it right now. But so somebody hit me up and they were like, "Yo, have you seen this book?" And what's crazy about it is the book is about Puharij. It's about the Nine, but it's also by somebody whose initials are NDS. And when that happened, I'm like, "What in the like? What are the odds of that?" But Top quickly realized that the publishing date was the very same day that we found this book, that somebody brought it to our attention. So I don't know if it was the guy who brought it to our attention that was messing with us. I suspect that it was, but part of the thing that is curious is that he didn't seem to, when I went through all his posts, he didn't have a history of doing that sort of thing. Here we are. I want to show this really quickly.
All right,
He didn't have a history of this sort of oh, you got it? You're pulling it up?
no, go ahead.
Okay. Here we go. This was so funny. For a second, I wasn't even that blown away by it. But I still was. I was like, damn, that's crazy. So here we go. It's this person says, "Did you write this?" In quotes, Nathan D. Smith equals NDS. Maybe it's just a coincidence. And if you look here at the cover, Andrija Puharij, Telepathy and the Mystery of Plasma. And as if that's not enough, he has the Council of Nine here, and they're depicted as angels. So when I realized they're depicted as angels, I'm like, holy crap, what are the odds of this? Somebody has written an entire book on it, but then Top noticed that it was
it's on Amazon and everything. You can look it up and actually buy this book. I don't know the content, so I wouldn't buy it because I think it's just AI. It's probably just AI somebody threw together really quick. But
yeah.
it is an interesting marker of, I guess, I don't know. There's one thing when you have people calling you, it's like, oh, we've reached a certain level. It's like now you're making mock books about it. It's very fun. I enjoy it.
Fun. Honestly,
Yeah.
like, round of applause for whoever pulled that off, because very clever. You have to dedicate yourself to a certain degree. You got to get AI to write this whole book. You got to make it purchasable on Amazon. Like that's going above and beyond for a bit. And like, damn it, I love that. Yeah. Somebody says, would be, what is that? Raven rejects North Pole. Jesus says, would be funny if it was just an empty book. It probably is. Either that or it's an amalgamation of NDS episodes where they just like, they just transcribed our episodes and put it in there. So very funny. Hats off to whoever that is. Really adding some depth. Honestly, I might buy it anyway, just because it's just a fun little memory from a time we were doing doing a thing. But I mean, we didn't even get really to talk about, I don't know if you want to get into this, this idea of the Ennead. We didn't talk about it last time. And I'm having a little bit of a hard time figuring out where we want to start this conversation.
Well, let's start on, so we have like episode 5. It's the 5th installment of this episode. It's more non-speaking students, and it's an interview of the teachers. So one of the teachers, Marianne Harrington, and another woman named just by Carrie, and they're basically giving their explanations as to like what happened here and what they've seen. It's just they're building credibility to the idea of telepathy. So, 30 years of her practice, Marianne has witnessed a couple of kids do this. She's conducted her own tests, like Lego color identification and Scrabble sequencing, that these kids have gotten correct. Carrie, also the same thing. They brought it to the principal, and this episode was kind of interesting. The principal was not surprised when I think Carrie brought this to the principal. So the principal's like, yeah, this happens, but just don't say anything. So like,
wow.
Yeah, that's a strange one, right? Like that the education system would know about this phenomenon. And
Well, you know what it shows you? That the education system actually doesn't take very much of an interest in children at all. It's just an indoctrination camp. It's not for like, oh yeah, that's fine. He might as well have said like, yeah, but that's not what we do here.
He's like, yeah, we don't try to help. Like
we make good production line workers. All right. We make good obedience, kind of. We don't worry about kids and their gifts or anything like that. Yeah, that's kind of funny.
The next episode 6, gets a little bit more interesting because now I think that Kai Dickens, by like halfway through, she's like, you know what, we're gonna get like she's done being like pussyfooting around and kind of like
she's had enough of the patriarchy. It's time to
time.
Dyes her hair blue and
she's ready to rock. Yeah, cuts the sleeves off her shirt.
It grows out her armpit hair.
Yeah, now she's expressing like skepticism in materialism, which is the science of what we can see and what we can actually prove, which is like it's kind of what this is the battle that we face with Clint every week. This is the battle that I face with Jose, who I unfortunately have to talk to all the time, and Cole. Toad actually agrees with us, but
Yeah, that's because Toad is very spiritual.
Toad is he's almost
He's almost an entity himself. He's basically some sort of interdimensional goblin.
he's
It's been built
barely in this
backwards.
realm. Yes,
He's barely in this realm. He's got his foot in one and his other foot in another. Yeah, I mean, I get that. You know, that's kind of the problem with the telepathy tapes for me is this is something that I already suspect is true. So it's a bit of a drag to listen to an uphill battle where they try to validate some of these concepts. So I'm like, I'm already dealing in a realm where I watch black people manipulate the wind. I'm not worried about whether or not these kids can display telepathic powers. I believe that they likely can. So
yeah.
it's a good entry point for the skeptic, I guess, but not a great listen if you're somebody who already suspects these things.
Right. So she talks about Rupert Sheldrake, which is somebody we can get to in a second, but
Yeah.
I think his predecessor, this guy named Rudolph Peters, he's the guy who sparked Rupert Sheldrake's um, interest in telepathy, this idea. So he was there's a story about a blind boy that is reading eye charts through his mother's eyes in the 1950s. They go as far as like driving them to separate locations that are like miles away, and through like over the phone, the mother looks at a chart, she looks at it, the son reads the words that he's seeing. So that leads to Rupert Sheldrake's the idea of distance, and then he equates it to the your family dog knowing when you're going to come home and things like this, and it's an interesting study.
This is something what I love about that is because if you go back to episode 1 where we spoke to Donut, Rupert Sheldrake comes up. So do the float tanks. It's a beautiful way of watching the development of this show and our ideas, but then watching it come full circle because episode 1 was Rupert Sheldrake, sensory deprivation tanks, telepathic communication with dolphins, John C. Lilly, the CIA, like all that was episode 1, and here we are. Sort of the most important thing that Top and I can see right now, and it's all of the same nature. So it's really wonderful in that kind of a way. But Rupert Sheldrake actually does have a podcast. I tried to give it a listen to. It's insufferable because he's very old, but he does really fascinating studies. And to your point, the family dog one. Well, that's Z-Man. Yeah, he nails it. I guess he must be a fan of Rupert Sheldrake. He goes, the family dog knowing when you're going to come is crazy. I didn't get to that part of the podcast. I was only at the part where they just knew when you were coming home. But they would, like 15 minutes before the owner would come home, the dogs would begin to, display anxiety, and they'd get up and they'd sniff the door and they'd maybe bark or they'd become unsettled. And even if you switched up the variable about when they were coming home, this would still happen. So fascinating. But I didn't know, Top, that this started because of a little peek into telepathy with a child and his mother back in the 50s. Did not know that.
Yeah. Episode 7, we're just like moving along, focusing on an individual 10-year-old named Amelia and her gifts of her parents figure out that she's got these telepathic gifts, but they also she also has these spiritual gifts. So this is where the show starts to really dive into woo, which is, I'm surprised that like most people when they get to this point don't turn it off, because it does get crazy. So like it delves into the idea of her doing mind reading, multilingual proficiency, precognition, that's a big one, communication with the deceased, and emphasizing the broader potential of non-speakers to tap into the foundational consciousness. So this,
Okay, what were the first few?
mind reading,
Okay.
multilingual proficiency,
Interesting.
precognition, and
Okay,
community. Yeah.
So the precognition immediately tips its hat to schizophrenia for me, which, Dr. Jerry Marcinski, everybody have a drink. It's not what we say it is. And then the mind reading also has some of that, because people who spend time around people with schizophrenia will often get dialogue from them that seems to be like, did you know I was thinking that? and it often ends in like a very sort of confrontational situation. And then there was another one. What the hell was it? It was precognition, the telepathy, and what was this number two? What was number two?
One sec, let's pull that back up. Um, yeah, precognition, multilingual proficiency.
That's fascinating. Okay, so multilingual proficiency is something that I've become aware of after head trauma. So people will experience head trauma and suddenly become proficient in a different language or in a pursuit, a skill set like a piano savant or mathematics or something like that. But all these things are all having to do with the receiver, having to do with your brain, either through blunt force trauma, where now all of a sudden you're an expert in French, or through trauma that ends up in schizophrenia, which then manifests itself as precognition and maybe even mind reading. Fascinating, very fascinating.
But that also it also starts to touch on the idea of the Akashic records or
Mhm.
whatever is going on. I guess like people maybe that would even be called like the Library of Alexandria, but it's almost like this stuff exists around us at all times. Like
Mhm.
the entirety of all human information, these kids are able to just pick at it. And like very much like the same way we were talking about this idea that we had that then developed into this just kind of like falling out of the sky. Like we just picked at this, and the more you pick at it in the ether, wherever this idea is, the more things come together.
Yeah.
So these kids might actually be able to do this, knowingly, do this willingly, which
You know, the end of all this, which obviously we'll get to at the end of this show, um, came to me. It just straight up came to me, dog. I called you when it came to me, and you even like laughed. You were like, huh, "Holy!" And it was like the way that it fell into my lap was like I did not do anything. A video came across my feed, and then the context for that video was just dropped into my head as I drove. So even if I were to sit here and say Ian Carroll stole my thing, which we say in a humorous way, but it's like, what did he steal from me? Some that just popped up in my head, like I did the legwork, and like, dude, I didn't do the legwork. This just dropped in our lap over and over again. It started with Puharage. Well, I guess it started with episode 1 a year and a half ago, episode 1 with Donut. We didn't even know what we were setting out to talk about. I barely knew you. You barely knew me. We didn't know Donut. I was, totally pumped that he would give us the time of the day to come and be on our show. And I didn't even know what the hell we were going to talk about. You didn't know what we were going to talk about. It just happened. And we're talking about float tanks. We're talking about Rupert Sheldrake. Like, man, whatever you could try to accuse somebody of taking from us, it wasn't ours to begin with.
yeah, I don't think. I mean, most of this stuff isn't. It's not really. You don't really have a claim on information.
Hmm.
I guess you can just present it in a certain way. What I'm more concerned with is not the information and not that it's out there, but like how it's presented.
Yeah.
Because you'll see this constantly. You'll see this with every psyop, and it's like usually who gets there first, or usually somebody with the biggest microphone. They're going to present information in a way that frames their narrative.
Hmm.
And then that leads you to question, well, what is your narrative? What do you want? What do you want to see? What do you want the world to look like? And I feel like that's fair. That's a fair question to ask people. Like, what are you really getting at here?
Right.
So, um, I don't know. I guess that can drive. I could see the rabbit hole that most conspiracy theorists go down, and how they like start ending up. They're pointing at the wall like Charlie Day,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think I think that that's a mistake. Being like David Icke, this
Mm.
might be a mistake. The smarter thing to do is to frame your narrative in a compelling way, and then you just have to sell it better. That's really
Right. Well, they're
what.
giving us a narrative, and whether or not it is overt, that narrative is, we've talked about it before. Autism and the development of these telepathic powers seems to be maybe potentially a breakthrough in human development, a positive one. And then, of course, there's also the messaging. So we've talked about Puharage and his communicating with the Iliad, the Nine. And on other shows, we've talked about people who experience alien abductions will have the same narrative given to them, and that narrative we're about to say it. It ends up being a very similar narrative to what these children are getting, right? Because it's like you have these children with zero life experience. It's weird because they can perform telepathy, and so we attribute to them this almost like wisdom that you wouldn't attribute to a child with no life experience. This sort of divinity, even you can call it divinity, right? And that divinity that you attribute to these nonverbal autistic children for their, their breakthrough in telepathy, it elevates them. So eventually they have this message, which is a weird thing to do. I'm just sorry. It's weird to elevate nonverbal autistic children because you wouldn't elevate anybody who did not have any tangible life experience. And it's not a dig at them. They can't go out and get a job. They can't go out and socialize and engage with ideas. All these, they're prisoners to their own flesh. So you elevate them in the way of divinity, and then they come along with a message, and that message suddenly is like, we have to worry about the planet.
Yeah. There's also some like weird red flags in this episode about this girl. Well, I'll just mention. So they bring up the hill again, and this is another girl that, if we're to believe Kai Dickens, that is completely separate from the previous people who have spoken about the hill. I think the kid named Houston was one of the first ones in an earlier episode to mention whatever this is that they're communicating on. She brings this up. Okay, that's all good and fine. But there's a quote here that I actually highlighted. They are talking about Amelia and what she wants to be, and she actually wants to be a doctor, but she wants to be a genetics doctor, right? And she likens telepathy and the acceptance of telepathy to the Earth's roundness discovery, which I was like, well, I'm not even sure anymore. Like
Earth's roundness discovery, dude. Please, what the hell does that mean?
Also, because people thought that it was flat before, and then
that's so funny. So they're using the trope from like Men in Black, right, where Kay is talking to Jay, Tommy Lee is talking to Will Smith, and he goes, 500 years ago, people knew that the earth was flat. 1,000 years ago, people knew that we were the center of the universe. Imagine what we're going to know tomorrow. In other words, being like people are consistently wrong about things that they think that they know.
yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. And given the state of flat earth, the fascinating.
I mean, listen, I don't know if it's flat. I don't know if it's round, but I do think I just find it interesting that they're like, they're using she's using a normie talking point to bolster her points. This girl, what's her name? Amelia.
Mm.
And also she's like focused on becoming a genetics doctor, which is kind of like, again, this is all
very specific.
Very specific. This is all a little too uncomfortable for me, but if you're not kind of clued into what's been going on here, this doesn't like raise any alarms for you. You just like,
well, good news for her. If she seeks to become a genetics doctor, very soon we're going to have Project Stargate. And once that's all done and we mash up that sort of mRNA gene therapy with artificial intelligence, I'm sure she's going to have a great field to be a part of and to conduct her studies. But hopefully somebody's around to touch her elbow while she types, because I don't know how she's going to be able to do that. But listen, before we go any further, we probably do got to pull the plug on these people, because it is 35 minutes in. 35 minutes in. If you want to continue watching along, hear the exact same thing that you've heard on previous episodes, but we have to do it. We have to get this out because we did part one.
There'll be more.
There's new revelations, yes.
Yeah.
And if you want access to them, it's patreon.com/Nephilim Death Squad. Sign up for whatever tier you'd like. Continue enjoying the show, enjoying an ad-free experience, and hanging out in the live chat. All that and more over on patreon.com/Nephilim Death Squad. Otherwise, we're out of here. Peace out, guys. Okay, so where are we going from here?
We're going to review episode 8 or episode 9. I'm not even sure. Just going to go little by little. Hold on. I'm kicking out everybody here. I'm sorry, guys. Goodbye.
Very sorry. Very sorry.
They're all gone. Okay, boom. All right. Episode 8. We're just flying through this. You don't have to even watch it. Just trust what we're saying here. Episode 8 is focusing on the idea of spelling. and the importance of it. It's kind of I don't know. And from what I remember, this is like a throwaway episode. Like
Right. Okay.
yeah, they're advocating for more more nonverbal autistic kids to use this method and possibly discover if find out if they have some sort of telepathy. So it just goes on about that. They talk about the gatekeeping of spelling advocates, and being pushed down and not able to not being able to spread this message. It being looked at as pseudoscience. So
It's interesting because part of what they talk about in that episode is like this idea of a paradigm shift, and I'm looking at
yeah,
that now, and to me, it's just like 2025, the golden age, right? All those occultists talking about the golden age. What are they talking about? It's the age of Aquarius. It's a paradigm shift. We're leaving materialism, the end of the Kali Yuga, like, and then these nonverbal autists are like, I think the paradigm's going to shift. Interesting.
right. All right, moving quickly past that, we'll just go to episode 9, and then we'll wrap up like basically this show, and then we'll talk about what we're going to talk about, what we want to say. This one focuses on the spiritual messages. Kind of, this is
Okay.
an important, yeah. So they're insights about God, heaven, consciousness, and the unknown. So
Hmm.
you've got the guys Josiah, Max, John Paul, and it's a strange one. They're talking about the afterlife. They're talking about what God is. It's very hard to understand what they mean, or how they could even experience this, and also how they could know for sure what they're looking at or talking to. But they all do express this idea of the afterlife. They express this idea of like these angelic beings that are like all love. Did you listen up to this part?
No, I'm not. And I'm looking through the notes right now. Um, so for example, what kinds of messages did those Josiah start typing after the floodgates open? And his first sentence is, God is a good gift giver. Interesting. And he typed every day 7-year-old concerns, interests, and musings alongside. And then Max interprets Josiah's insights. And there's a quote here: God using that boy to let me know he sees me. It's interesting. Yeah, I mean, we talk about often that to engage with these realms without spiritual discernment could be pretty problematic just because of the things that inhabit it. But I do feel this little part of me, and I imagine other people give way to this more than I am right now, where like because this is telepathic and these are autistic children, you kind of like, oh, they talk to God. Like it's more than an awe they talk to God. I think it's that there's a part of your mind, maybe we've been conditioned to do this, that wants to, like I said, elevate these kids to somebody used the phrase oracle before in the chat. And it's like you want to give that almost that status to these children. But I would never recommend that anybody just go into the spiritual realm and start communicating with entities. And if somebody said I was talking to God, I would say, well, how do you know it was God? But I don't think people would feel very compelled to ask these children how they know it was God.
Yeah, they're not asking the right questions, or they're just not asking the questions at all, which is it's like that's what makes this whole thing so frustrating, right? It's like there's a lot more here, but we're letting these guys get away with just telling us the bare minimum, you know?
Right. Man.
Um so yeah, they talk about this they suggest that there's a dimensional overlap
Hmm.
between the heavenly realm or the spiritual realm and this realm. This is where they're getting the these musings, the ideas from. So this is something that we've been discovering for a long time as well, and I definitely think it's true. Now, in this episode, it's it's a little. This is a like a heavy episode because they let you know that one of the nonverbal autistic kids, or like he's partially verbal. This guy John Paul, he dies, and
How does he die?
he he goes to take like a bath or something like that, or goes into a hot tub, which he does all the time. Like he's fascinated, he loved water, and he goes in and just drowns there. They
Damn,
don't. Yeah, dude, it's
that's
pretty
fucking
heavy.
horrible.
Yeah, the mother finds him and he's just drowned in the tub. They try to resuscitate him, but it was like too long. But it seemed like something that like he does all the time. Like he was capable of just going and taking a bath by himself, or going in the hot tub and enjoying the water. Um, but in this
Somebody
episode,
brought up a good point. I'm sorry to interrupt, but JJ, he says, I mean, you see it, right? Greta Thunberg was supposed to look like a little girl. Was that the message? Green new nonsense? I mean, very similar here. Good, good observation, JJ. We we wheeled out onto the world stage an autistic kid, and basically her message was we need to save the world. And what's funny about that is after it all settled, people who could see it for what it was were like, why the fuck are we giving this kid a platform to shame the rest of the planet and to spread this message as if she's wise beyond her years? And that is something that they end up doing to us, right? Is they'll use children as an emotional leverage point. And then what happens is if you should push against the narrative that the child is espousing, especially an autistic child, then you get hit with a big fat how dare you.
yeah, exactly. It's one of those things where it's like you can't, like what we're doing right now. And I think this is why I was I think why we're presenting it from a different angle than Ian or anybody else who's going to touch this, is because they're scared to like push back. What would people think if we're seeing bullying nonverbal autistic kids? Well, I have a background in bullying
Bullying
retarded.
autistic. Look, I mean, yeah, I could see that cover, right? So it's like I can't touch this, or else essentially what I'm doing is I'm calling on these children. Man, that's fascinating. That's a really, really great point with that whole Greta Thunberg, especially the connection to the climate related catastrophes. If this is the climate related catastrophe, the one that I'm thinking of, there's no amount of saving plastic from the ocean that's going to change it. That's fascinating. Great connection.
Yeah. Well, there's some other interesting things in here. So, this kid dies in the tub. It's pretty awful. But the people that he was in contact with on the hill, there were a bunch of them. He also had a girlfriend that was, I think they moved to the same area. They were in Georgia, but this girl Lily, they would contact telepathically all the time, and she expressed that she sort of had an idea that he was leaving. Like he kind of expressed that to her, that he was leaving, which is, this is another strange one, right? He tells Lily and a couple of other people, he clues them in, and even his mother in a way. I think like he told her something specific, which I didn't write down in the notes here, that he's like you're gonna be fine, like a message of finality, that
Hmm.
he was gonna leave, but then he drowns. It's not like he dies of like natural causes. Maybe he did, but he died in the tub, and he drowned.
If you drown yourself in a tub, that's pretty gangster. I just got to say, like in the way of conviction, like I would be like, like I couldn't do it. I'd come up out of the water. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
that's
and this guy was like he was a big dude. This I think John Paul was 6'8", like,
damn.
yeah, two something, like big boy. And one of those, like, before he was communicating with his mother, he was just all over the place, running around, smashing stuff, like just couldn't control him. It must have been like living with a monster.
Just living
Um,
with Ian Carroll, yeah.
yeah, exactly. Imagine. So for him to not be able to get out of this tub, or like the hot tub or bath, or wherever he drowned in, it's like kind of strange. But another thing that I found interesting was that she said that, Lily says that her and John Paul would communicate daily, and she could feel his presence the most when she was in water. So I think that's why he really enjoyed being, which is, I mean, it could be kind of nefarious, but he liked being in the water. He would be in that bath like almost daily. And I think that he's using that as like maybe some sort of a deprivation tank, float tank, something like that, to be able to
Yeah.
better connect to this realm. Other kids will go, like some kids will come when they get home from school, they go upstairs and they put their heads under the pillows and they put their blankets over them, and they would just create like this silence, and then they would traverse into the realm where the hill is at, because they're depriving all of their other senses. They're creating
They're doing that's what 11 does in Stranger Things, right? She's going
Mhm.
to this other realm. She can go there, she can astral project, but she needs like there is actually a an episode where she uses something that's pretty close to a deprivation tank. She's getting in water. I remember that. And that's what's helping her do this thing. So I would say, yeah, if this kid is obsessed with going in the bath every day and they're all meeting up at the hill, that's probably what he was doing.
Yeah, that's so if you're doing that again, when I listened to it, I was like, I don't know, man. The mother was like, oh, he was at peace, and everyone's just like kind of like, yeah, it's so great that that this happened. I'm like, I don't know what happened here, man. I don't know. Like, if you are putting yourself in a realm like this where you can traverse in a spiritual realm, and then you happen to die in this realm when you are traversing, I start to suspect some sort of foul play. But again, this doesn't discover it. They don't even really care to talk. And I get it. Like if I'm talking to the mother, I'm not going to do a whole piece on like, well, what actually happened here.
Right.
But we're not talking to the mother. We're talking
This
to
is
it.
worth mentioning. Marnie Mac here says water has energy, especially moving water. And a lot of these, this is actually something that I picked up on Merkel's show recently that ends up coming up a lot in these testimony and things like that. And you also see this as a plot device in films. Whenever somebody has this slip where they end up in another realm, call it the upside down or whatever, sometimes they'll have crossed like a stream or a creek or something like that. Very often when people see an entity, this is actually something that Tony's uncovering himself, and I think this is a good catch. Is that people will often have crossed over a stream, and there is something about water. We know that water is special, right? The concept of like living waters and how frequency interacts with water, like cymatics and things like that. I
Yeah.
know that's typically done with like sand, but you could also do it with water. And then obviously those experiments that we always bring up where you speak affirmations one way or another, and the water will um, crystallize either chaotically or orderly when it's frozen, depending on whether or not was spoken positive or negative affirmations to. And my own experience where I saw, well, to this day, what I just think it was an alien in the woods. I had crossed over a small creek, and it happened on the other side of that creek. And then when I came back over that bridge, that's where all my friends were that like didn't see it, didn't hear it, didn't know it happened. Um, and so I often wonder about that now. So yeah, water's an interesting, plays probably a more important role in this whole thing than we're aware.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. I mean, there's that idea of the sea not existing in the beginning, right?
Mhm.
And God creating the sea and almost like salting it. Like if I were to burn your crops and then salt the earth, you can't grow anything there. So if there's salt, there's no movement. It's dead. There's no
Yeah,
spiritual movement. So if you're
dead
in
water.
you're in dead water, that's not going to happen in the ocean, which is why people think that the fallen angels are being kept under the ocean, or the aliens also come from under the ocean, probably to talk to the fallen angels because they can't really communicate otherwise. They got to go there.
Mm.
uh, but if you're in a bathtub that's circulating water, there is some kind of life there.
I told you that before too. That's I just to my own detriment. I'll bring this up again, but I pray while I'm in the shower, which is awkward because I'm naked. But I pray out loud, and I pray on my knees, and I just in my mind I think there's some significance to water. Um, I don't know how to explain it, but it's just it's what I do. I don't give a lot of thought to it, but I do it,
Right, right. That's
and I wonder if God's laughing. my butthole's exposed.
I think there's something to it. I think there is something to it.
Maybe.
All right, let's finish this off. Episode 10. It's like a wrap up. They're talking to all the families, still kind of talking about John Paul's death a little bit, but
Hmm.
they start to get into their final message, and this is where it's just raising red flags for me. There's a lot of like weird leftist language. There's a lot of hippy dippy where I'm like, it just doesn't sit right with me. I can't really explain why, but it doesn't sit right with me. So one of the things that they articulate in this last message, they're urging society to adapt rather than to force a conformity to what they're doing. They're emphasizing recognition over assimilation. So the words like adapt rather than conform. So conform would be like there are people that are telepathic. Okay. To adapt, I feel like you're asking us to do what you're doing. Like, are you trying to? I think that's what the point of this is. This podcast is like trying to get people to be comfortable with the idea of ascension, or um, be comfortable with the idea of picking up these powers that these kids have, or the lack of power. But it's to create acceptance for this idea. But that the verbiage of adapt,
It
gives
feels like adaptation, augmentation, like it feels, I don't know why, but it's giving me like transhumanism. And I mean, I know why, because I know where my head's already going, but
yeah. Well, this is
yeah.
again, hear what they say about they're talking about the idea of human potential and understanding. So they're advocating for broader views of human capabilities, rooted in love, unity, and compassion. And they're suggesting that everyone has unique gifts to share, as seen in Houston's call for a love. So Houston, he calls for a love-driven evolution.
Love-driven evolution. I'm struggling with that word more and more these days. Love.
Love, yeah. What
You
do they,
know,
well,
like
what do they mean by it?
right. Like we've already seen like the implications of love is love, right?
Mhm.
Like we've watched what that's done to our culture. It's rotted it like an infestation, much to the detriment of specifically our children. So love is love. Is that good? I don't think so. And then you say like, well, God is love. I'm like, it's amorphous. God is love. God is more than love. I would say feels like a lot more than love. I mean, love is certainly an aspect of it, but what form does love take? Like when you punish your child, do you do that out of hatred or do you do it out of love? And I would argue I punish my child because I love him and I want him to succeed, and he has to know that there's implications to his decisions. And so is that the love that you're talking about? Because I don't think so. I think the love that you're talking about is much closer to love is love. And uh, that doesn't have much of a place, I don't think, not in sort of culture at large, because it's too unspecific. And through that banner, many things can slip in.
Right, exactly. So I man, I wish Ed Mabry was here to define love for us again, because it doesn't mean this. And also, like, what could these people possibly know about uh love
Right.
between two? Well, I mean, listen, maybe they do. I'm not sure. But they're describing like this feeling of like when they're in this feeling of when they're in this presence of this other thing, they're saying like, oh, the love is like overwhelming, and it's like a big hug, this kind of thing. Like it encapsulates my body, and I have these feelings, and they describe that as love. But I think love is more like, I am going to do this thing even though it hurts me, even though it's not good for me, because it's better for you. It's like love
Yeah,
is like a
like
sacrifice,
yes.
right?
Yeah.
Rather than this feeling of, oh, we all feel good when when we say a certain thing. We all feel good when we're accepted, when there's diversity or whatever it is.
Hmm.
Uh so I don't know. I don't know where to put this. But again, this is why I was explaining that there's like a lot of weird verbiage, a lot of weird language in this podcast series, and it comes from a left wing point of view. that I'm not entirely comfortable with because I don't know what they mean when they use the definitions of these words.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's weird. Like I said, I don't think that they mean the dynamic love of like a father that includes like sacrifice and discipline and things like that. I think it's much more of just like a, love everybody.
yeah,
And it's like, what does even that mean? I don't know. I don't wish you any ill will, but to say I love you is even that like, and I know this is probably not going to be a very popular take, but when the Bible talks about like loving your neighbor and loving your enemy, I'm like, what does that mean? Because I don't have I, like I don't have ill will to anybody, but I don't want to talk to most people.
yeah.
You know what I mean? So when you say love, I'm like, there's got to be some clarification on that word. What do you mean? I'd be fascinated in knowing what does it mean to love your neighbor or love your enemy. It's like I don't. I am quick to forgive, and I also think I'm quick to forget, and that's why I have the sort of internal peace that I do. But I can wish you no ill will and celebrate even when you succeed, but I don't want to hug you.
Yeah, you're a complete stranger to me. So
Yeah.
like it would be disingenuous. Like when you're asking me to go out there and like love, I feel like you're asking me to become this is and this could also be used against me, but you're asking me to become weak in a sense
You're
because
asking me not to judge you. You're asking me
yeah,
not to not to look at you too critically and to just say, well, everybody's path is their own and yada yada and I'm like I don't think that that's it
do
either.
what thou wilt, like that's what you're
That
asking me
feels a
to
lot
do.
like love, right? Love is
Yeah.
love, do what thou wilt.
This is just what it feels like. Again, but the messages are being mixed up. They're coming from these kids who I don't even know. They don't really have much life experience, and then they're also coming from uh, a leftist lesbian who is operating under a certain moral framework, which I don't know where, but I can only suspect. Uh,
Mm.
so one of another thing that's interesting, very interesting, as this show comes to a close. This Anthony describes himself as a futuristic human. He because he has the ability to access interdimensional knowledge via frequency. Um, they also call for they all say this. They also call for love, openness, and emotional intelligence to evolve humanity. It's this new agey message where it's like part of it could be okay, but then when you start to look at these words that they're using, you should be a little bit worried.
Yeah, so let's just go back into this love is love thing, right? It's like you let's say you're at a parade. It's a parade and there's a dude and he's getting by another dude in the streets, which actually isn't above the realm of possibilities. This is something that actually was happening last gay day parade in places like Chicago and things like that in the big cities. These dudes were each other off in the streets and it's like you go up to that person and you have two choices here. You go love is love. And so who am I to judge this person and what they're into and things like that? Or you go, I don't know this, but it certainly doesn't mean that I want them to sully their soul and end up in hell. I want them to know that they don't have to do this and that Jesus Christ has already paved the way for them. And so then you proclaim like that is dog. Don't do that on the streets. My family eats here. This is supposed to be a society, a decent society, a first world country, and you're each other off in the streets. What the are you doing? And it doesn't mean that I hate you, but it means like, stop, man. What are you doing to yourself? What are you doing to the culture? What are you doing in front of people? What are you doing? And it's like, I see that as love more so because the way I'm looking at it is like, look, I don't really know you, but I don't want you to burn in hell, dog. I don't want you to make decisions that you're going to regret if you're ever wise enough to regret them. I don't want you to find out that you lived a life of sin and then hate the life that you lived. Like, I don't want that, but I don't want to hug either. I don't know. It's confusing to me. I don't know. Yeah, Z-Man says, "Don't be busting in the street, homie." That's it. And that feels like love to me more so than whatever the hell this celebrating of dick suckery is.
That's what again, that's my big issue with the telepathy tapes is the person that's writing it, the person that's creating it, where they're framing the narrative. It's like incredible information that they're bringing, but there's a narrative that's packaged with it, and it's going to move the world in a certain way. So I'm seeing it a different way. Again, one of the other kids calls for love-driven evolution. It's just a constant, and also paired with the idea of the environment got to protect the world, like normal New Age messages or
Well,
messages from entities.
shout out to Real Rye, the homie. Real Rye says, "Love is complex in a world of decadence."
Mm,
Like, yeah, that's a great way of putting it. Um, I think when your needs are very obvious, I need food, I need shelter, I need to survive, I need to provide. Um, then love is very easily defined. It's like self-sacrifice for others, right, and things like that. Um, but when you have everything and your cup runneth over, then love does in fact become very hard to define because it now can be applied in areas that simply didn't exist before. You know, LGBTQ parades don't exist when you're worried about putting food on the table. You know what I mean? Like a lot of these places where we now find love part of the functional conversation didn't even exist. Those places didn't even exist before. So I think that's a great observation. Yeah, love is very hard to define when your society is one of decadence.
that's right. Well, that's like basically the rest of this the telepathy tapes. And this is what we got from it. But now is the time to speculate wildly,
Oh,
Dave.
yes, I love the speculation part. I love the speculation part.
Yes,
So,
right at our point. Let's see what the hell we're doing here.
and look, you guys are gonna have to forgive us because we intended to do a two-part episode on this, and then it became very obvious after part one that we had to get this idea out because it feels like the idea came to a lot of people, and it was just asking one simple question: Who's gonna share me? And it doesn't give a if it's NDS, it doesn't give a if it's Ian Carroll. It needs to get out when its time is here. And so we ended up blowing the lid off of it on several different appearances and several of our own podcasts. So we're going to end up rehashing a lot of things and hopefully end up giving you some new stuff. But really, what we have in the way of speculation is a bunch of questions, and those questions are worth reiterating again. And they sound something like, why have the MK Ultra children been induced with a dissociative identity disorder through trauma? Why have the the Montauk children be exposed to their own latent psychic abilities by way of trauma that induces a dissociative identity disorder? Why is even the dissociative identity disorder the cornerstone of like the Catcher in the Rye? Going back to that episode what we did with William Ramsey, opens them up to suggestibility, creates almost a Manchurian candidate that's ready to be activated under the correct circumstances. And then why do we have the appearance of nonverbal, strange, you might call them autistic, but we can call them strange, nonverbal children in the UFO abductee phenomenon in the form of the black-eyed children? And then why do we have children who are experiencing the maybe most extreme case of identity dissociative disorder because their bodies are no longer cooperating with them, so they have to go inward, they have to detach from their body, and what ends up happening is they develop psychic ability. So that's kind of the question that I don't know if you would call that a thesis, probably not, right? But that's the question that we're operating from, and many times throughout this, it just begets more questions. We've already established that they're trying to paint this in a positive light. They're trying to paint this as if it's the next stage in human evolution, and they're doing that tentatively right now. It's not like they're really hammering that home, but what they've done with it is a good enough job that you will hear this speculated on pretty fervently. Like, you'll see it on Twitter and like that. I think even Ian Carroll was talking to somebody where that ended up coming up. Is this a new stage in human development? And I would also say that narrative is something that you even hear from Joe Rogan, but specifically when it comes to the Greys. Like he talks about how the Greys are us, but it's the next stage in human development. We'll get to the point where we don't need to eat, so our mouths get small, and we're very intelligent, so our brains get huge. And we're no longer doing physical things, so our bodies atrophy, and we're having babies through IVF or whatever, so there's no need for genitals either because sexual reproduction is gone. So it's strange because there is a lot of packaging of the development of mankind our evolution, and then some of the examples that we have of what that might look like don't really look that great. And so that's the operating question. Why the overlap? And when you start to look into it, it looks a lot less like overlap as much as it looks like one and the same thing. Right. And this started with Puharij in very many ways, where we found out that he was connected to so many things that we talk about or we orbit a discussion in one way or another. Turns out if you dig into that topic, you might find Puharij. It's kind of like that, where not so much overlap, but really that this thread passes through this entire, what would you call that, puzzle. And so I guess how do we want to go about doing this? Did we talk about Rogan last time?
Probably, but whatever.
So Rogan is talking to, and we talked to Seven Seas recently, and he has a really interesting thread on Rogan that I recommend people check it out. It's like a schizo map, but it shows you who is paying Rogan, and I think we might actually find some connections there, maybe worth looking at after this episode. But Rogan has this really interesting habit of introducing to us machinations of the intelligence agencies, specifically the MK Ultra programs, to the extent that when we talked to Cosmic Peach yesterday, which is a fun episode, she said, and I would agree with her, that Rogan is like the new Laurel Canyon. So let's take that premise. What does that mean? Well, Laurel Canyon is engineering our superstars, and our superstars are steering culture. So in very many ways, Laurel Canyon or the CIA is manufacturing culture, and they're using talking heads to do it. And they slowed the anti-war movement, and they introduced the psychedelic movement. And you can make a strong argument that that sort of thing never stopped. You saw it happen to hip hop, certainly during the crack epidemic of the 80s, the advent of gangster rap, and the imprisonment of countless black fathers, black males in the community end up going to prison or dying because of their involvement with the crack epidemic, which was to fund the Iran-Contra wars. So they've always had their hand on this. It seems really unlikely that they wouldn't have done it to Rogan. I mean, why wouldn't you? I believe that Rogan is as influential as like an NWA at this point. When you say probably more influential than NWA was at the height of their influence. And what does he influence us to do? Well, he's influenced us to go to our sensory deprivation tanks, and we've already talked about how that's a John C. Lilly thing, and he's communicating with dolphins psychically while he's taking psychedelics, which is so close to the MK Ultra program that it's no surprise that they took an interest in his research. He also is resurrecting the psychedelic movement here in the United States. I would say that Joe Rogan is the number one driving force behind much of the psychedelic movement that's taken place over the past 10 years. In fact, I ended up taking 5 dried grams of mushrooms. Probably would have never taken that had I not gone down the Rogan rabbit hole. So the question is, and that's mostly what we have, why is Rogan introducing this concept of psychedelics to us in a time where they kind of fell away, right? They fell away. I wouldn't say that there was a huge interest in it, but DMT, dimethyltryptamine, who wrote The Spirit Molecule? I don't know if that was Terence McKenna. He's always popularizing Terence McKenna. He's always talking about DMT. There's been an explosion in the interest of it, and it's exclusively due to him, I would say. And that's not something that Rogan doesn't say either. Rogan says that, especially in regards to the sensory deprivation tanks, that a ton of people attribute their success in the industry, opening up some sort of a therapeutic center with sensory deprivation tanks. They attribute it to him, and he's very willing to accept that attribution.
I always said, like, I wanted to talk to Rogan, but I just wanted to ask him one question. Like, if I was able to ask him a question, and now I feel like I don't need to because of the show, but the question was, if I do take mushrooms or DMT or whatever drug that you're promoting, and I go into this experience with a question, will I get an answer, or will I be able to ask that question at the very least, or is this just going to be like me falling down a psychedelic hole that's filled with colors? And the answer turns out that, yeah, it seems like you are able to ask that question, but the real question should have been, will I get an answer? And you'll get an answer, but it's not going to be maybe. but most likely not going to be true. You're going to come out with some understanding of some profound meaning of whatever you ask, but
Mm.
if you don't go in there and you're not testing the spirits as they say in the Bible, then these things can just straight up tell you whatever. And now your worldview is completely skewed. You might be doing, you might be a useful idiot on behalf of some entities that want to see something happen.
Right. And speaking of those entities, this phenomenon of engaging with these psychedelics, um, and then communicating with entities, that's pretty obvious. But then if you look side of the phenomenon, the aforementioned trauma based mind control or trauma that leads to a dissociative identity disorder, these people will also end up coming into communication one way or another through their telepathic travels with some sort of entity. And before we even talk about that, we have to reiterate that Puharij talks to the nine, right? So you guys have probably heard us talk about this before. This message that we get over and over again, which is the same one that the telepathy tape kids espouse, and it's this fear of whatever's happening with the climate, and it's also this, directive to ascend. So if we could just avoid this calamity, we can ascend, and that's very much like what was going on, by the way, with not only the Galactic Federation of Light, but there was a lady on TikTok who was talking to an entity named Seven, and she was talking to him through a Ouija board that her and her husband were engaging with for like the better part of 15 years, I think, something crazy like that. And Seven claims to be part of another body of entities, and that it's been trying to intervene on humanity's behalf. And that intervention is one of, trying to steer us in the right way when it comes to like our tendency to violence and shit like that, but also that there is something coming and they are trying to get ahead of it and they're trying to protect us from it. And if we can just get past that, then we can sort of ascend and take our place among their rankings. This is the same message that alien abductee victims often get, which is strange because in a phenomenon that's filled with essentially kidnapping and they see fit from time to time to impart this message on us. So while they're not being obsessed with our genetics, when they're not removing the uterus from cows, and while they're not engaging in some hybridization program where they're introducing you to your black-eyed children who they inseminated you with, and then when you carried them to a reasonable term, they abducted you and took these children and then reintroduce you to them in the future where they spoke telepathically to you. When they're not engaging in those things, they're forewarning us about a disaster of sorts with the planet. And also, of course, that we have to ascend. So it's over and over again. There's a disaster and you have to ascend. I believe even the Ennead who talked to Puharij talked about having to intervene in humanity's course to avoid a disaster. And so we spent a long time thinking about that because we talked about Greta Thunberg, right? And that funny connection, how she's also an autist who's worried about the climate. And I'm thinking, like, what is this about? Carbon taxes? Is this about, the new Green Deal? Like, what is this about? I don't, because it doesn't seem as worrying when you put it that way. In other words, like many of us suspect that the climate is naturally changing. Maybe there is some, like, there's pollution and that's not good, but no amount of giving the government money is going to stop the climate from changing because the earth goes through these cycles, right? So why then, if I suspect that to be the case, are these ETs, are the Ennead, are these even the entities that people communicate with that they think are spiritual when they're doing, mushrooms and like that, they also bring this same message back. So why are they warning about us? Is that really what's going to happen? Are we really going to watch the coastline, change dramatically? The sea levels are going to rise. Global warming is going to happen. There's a hole in the atmosphere because we can't stop driving, a Ford Taurus. I don't know if that makes sense. And well, I don't know if you want to try to find this top. If you go on Twitter and you type in Elon and pole shift, maybe we could watch this video. So this connection gets really weird because you have Elon Musk, who is everybody's favorite autist, right? And you have Neuralink, which, by the way, he just filed a trademark for the terms telepathy and telekinesis. So in other words, when he puts Neuralink in your brain and you have Neuralink to Neuralink interface between you and another individual, or you're engaging with your computer telepathically and you're moving things around without having to touch them, you could call that telekinesis. So it's a great move on his behalf in regards to capturing those words before the competition did, whoever is the competition for Neuralink. I don't think he's kind of alone in that one.
Him and the devil.
Yeah, it's between him and the devil. I don't know if the devil's whipping up some that's going to be a little bit better than what he's got, but those are strange connections. The autism thing with Elon Musk, the telepathy thing with his Neuralink, but that's not where it ends. We find out in this video, and we're going to play it, that he is obsessed with going to Mars, which we all know about Elon Musk, because he's worried about some impending climate-related disaster. So let's let this play a little bit.
You can really go down a deep rabbit hole if you read about ice ages.
Yeah. Really? Like
Yeah,
what?
deep rabbit hole on ice ages.
What's so intriguing about him?
The whole Earth has just been through the whole Earth is just freezing.
Like I said, there's deep rabbit hole on ice ages. Deep rabbit hole.
Where should we
There's
go?
so many.
Wait, there's so many what?
Wikipedia or
Wikipedia.
Encyclopedia of Canada.
Give us like a little
Britannica.
bit of a tidbit of it.
Yeah, why do you love it?
What I love it. I mean, I think it's just interesting
So interesting. That's
that
crazy.
how much Earth's climate has changed, and even where the magnetically where the poles are has shifted over time.
Pause.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. That's the
Pause. Yep. Magnetically, where the, by the way, those guys, they have no idea what he's saying at all. It just doesn't ring a bell to them. And in that video, he goes on to talk about, he's worried about these cycles. He's worried about even the poles magnetically where they are, right? And then he goes on to say that if it were to happen again, which it seems like it will because it's on a cycle, that even the moon wouldn't be far enough away, and that we'd have to go to a place like Mars. So I know I'm jumping
another one,
into-
David. I don't know if you want to check this one out. This should be like 30 seconds, but
Sure.
And frankly, even with climate change, life on Earth will still continue. I mean, the calamities that Earth has suffered, where life continued afterwards, like gigantic meteorite impacts, super volcanoes, the continents drifting all over the place. There have been times in Earth's past where it's been like a total snowball, or it's been absolutely sweltering hot. And life, we had many extinction events, but there were, but life continued.
he's talking about polar shifts again
Mhm.
with this
Yeah.
thing with this guy Zuby.
So he like I said, goes on to talk about how he thinks he would have to go to Mars. So my point here is to say that we all know that about Elon, that he's trying to make it to Mars, and we all know that Werner von Braun wrote that book where there's a fictional character named Elon who colonizes Mars and yada yada yada. And it seems to be that that's what he was named after. In fact, I watched a video of Elon's father saying just that. So we're familiar with that, but somehow it escaped me that the reason he wants to go to Mars isn't just to become a multi-planetary species, which obviously by its nature would save us from calamity. If it happened on one planet, we'd be okay on the other planet. I get that, but he's not talking about that in a soft way. He's talking about it in an urgent way. And it's wild to me to think that that is the origins in very many ways of his desire to get to Mars. So we have all these entities and they're all worried about the same thing. And they're coming from a bunch of different angles, right? I mean, Elon Musk is more than likely in contact with some sorts of entities. But I think that's the real through line here. I think when I was thinking about carbon taxes and climate change and the way that we're fed culturally and politically, the reason that it wasn't making sense is because it doesn't make sense. But I've been thinking lately, and this isn't a black pill at all, guys. I'm just thinking out loud. We have this phenomenon of like the earth, the sun changing colors, right? To say that it used to be more yellow, now it's really white, like a UV light, like a harsh kind of a light. And we have like the Schumann resonance going bonkers all the time. It's spiking constantly, and nobody knows what to make of it. Why is this the natural resonance of the earth going through these cycles where it's like it's predictable, and then all of a sudden it's just spiking off the charts for an undetermined amount of time. Then you have I don't know, weird things with animals where the animals are behaving oddly. I see videos occasionally where it's like thousands and thousands and thousands of fish just suddenly wash up on the shore, or like hundreds of birds mysteriously just like fall out of the sky and die, and
Or
nobody knows what the fuck is going on.
planes just crash for no reason. I think the Rock's plane had some mechanical issues in the sky just today. So
I mean,
things flying. It's crazy.
and that's something that plugs into it too, because their navigational devices are based off of the magnetosphere, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, I'm no pilot, but I'm pretty sure that that's how these things operate, especially when it comes to their navigation things, like their the compasses and things like that. and then it just brings me to this notion of like talking to Crow 777, and he's showing us this additional celestial body. Like, I don't even know what to make of that. Like, I know I saw those pictures, I know what it looks like, but I don't know what I'm looking at. But this guy is an amateur astronomer, and he's bought a $10,000 telescope, and he's been doing this for a long time. And he seems, in my estimation, to be a guy who, I'm not going to say he's credible because I don't know him, but I can certainly see that he's analytical. Like, he's caring quite a bit about the way that he captures these images and the way that he presents them, because he doesn't want to be perceived as somebody who's manipulating footage. And I don't know, a guy who spends that much money and who cares that much, I'm interested to hear what he has to say. And then it strikes me as significant, because what could potentially change the sun's color if that's true, right? What could knock planes and birds out of the skies? I don't know, maybe the introduction of an additional celestial body would have implications. And even the way that he said it too, Crow said that there'd be spiritual implications to this. And once again, he used the term about the Kali Yuga, right? This idea that we were in a dark age, intellectually and spiritually, but now that we're coming out of that, and that in his estimation, it's due to this additional celestial body, somehow this thing's proximity to us has an effect on our intellect and our spirit. And so what he says is that if you had this many bulldogs skateboarding 70 years ago, it would have been insane. People would have been falling out of their chairs. And now it's like an everyday phenomenon. You get all kinds of animals doing all kinds of crazy things. And admittedly, yeah, I don't really bat an eye at it anymore. I watched a dog communicate with buttons, and I was like, I think that dog's smarter than me, So, but is he right? Would that have broken ground back in the day? Would people have been floored by that kind of I don't know. Doesn't seem to floor us now. So if he's right and everything's going through this spiritual upheaval because this thing is coming close to us, could that even be why entity encounters are seemingly like way in an upswing? Like, is this thing thinning the veil? Because a lot of people, we got started on this show very much due to the confessionals. And if you follow the confessionals, it's basically just a paranormal supernatural testimony show where people come out and they share their experiences. They're getting crazier. They're getting way crazier. And I don't think there's any shortage of them either. And then doing this show and doing Chronicles, it's like we get so much data from people that you're forced to ask, like, are these supernatural encounters more common than you think? Because this is really prolific. This is a lot of data that's coming in. There's a lot of emails, and it's not just our show.
It's
And
almost
we're
like
not
everybody has at least one, whether they know it or not. This is so yeah, no, it's very common. It's extremely common. These
which is weird.
realms,
Has that always been that way? I don't know.
I think it ebbs and flows. I think it was there was a low point recently that Tucker Carlson was talking about, the spirituality that was detached from the United States or the world in specific around the 60s, where God died apparently, and now we are coming back, but with a vengeance. And it's like that's why we're tying all this stuff together. We have the telepathy tapes that's pointing at this on our children to figure out how they can thin this veil, how our children could communicate in the spiritual realm. And unfortunately, they're trapped there. And, like with Fauci and the Beagles, there's going to be some broken eggs when you're doing this, especially if you don't really care. But it's like, are they doing this? Why else would you experiment unless you're trying to figure out something very important? Are these people just soulless monsters, or is there something very important on the horizon that they're trying to avoid?
Well, Frank asked us that, and it's not like we have more questions than we have answers. That's for sure. But if you try to make me stretch and think about some of these answers, I might be able to do something like that. And he said basically, like, what's the point? What's the end goal for destroying these children? And we talked about how there was a time where they were messing around with these dental implants, and these dental implants seem to be able to give you the ability to channel frequencies one way or another. And we talked about that. That's Lucille Ball. She's picking up communications between Japanese and surgeons because of her dental implants, and then she's able to actually give that information to the proper authorities and thwart some sort of a, I don't know, some sort of a Japanese insurrection. I don't know what the hell was going to happen, but it didn't happen because of that. And what I think happened is they found out that that was a viable thing, and it's almost like they want people to talk to these entities. They want other people to channel these entities. So what they did then is it's unrealistic to scale it up if it's dental implants. Because you have to get people to come in for routine dental and then end up getting dental surgery one way or another. And I just don't think it's that viable. It's a lot of legwork, and it's just not enough people. What works out a lot better is if you, instead of putting these metals in the teeth, you could just put them straight into the brain, right? And so what ends up happening is they put all these toxic heavy in the, they create a schedule, and they start inundating us from childhood with all these heavy that, scientifically speaking, they are discovering settle in the brain. That's where these heavy settle. So I look at that and I wonder if the point of putting the metal in us was to have an antenna, have a conductor. Metal is a conductor, a frequency. If you can get it inside the body, then you have essentially what is an antenna in you. And if it's dialed to the right frequency, then maybe you get on the right channel, let's say. And to scale it up, you just give them shots from childhood, a little bit at a time, until it eventually accumulates. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a correlation if you look at people with schizophrenia and you could somehow determine the levels of heavy in their brains, if it would be considerably high. And so then the question is still there that Frank asks, what's the point? What are you doing? What are you just going to destroy these kids? And what? You're going to destroy all these kids? That doesn't make sense. If you want to control people, do you want to control a populace of nonverbal autistic people? That doesn't really seem like a good move. And then I realize that something amazing happened where this isn't new. Rupert Sheldrake's been doing this for a long time. We all have suspected the conversation around psychic abilities has always existed. So why now? What's changed it? What's made it significant? Why does anybody give it? Why are the Telepathy tapes the #1 podcast in the world? Well, I think they did something kind of amazing where they put this phenomenon of telepathy, of psychic ability, in the hands now of children who can't speak, which is insane. Here you go. Why would you ever want a messenger that couldn't speak? And it's because when the world finally figured out that they could speak, we'd all listen.
Mm.
I think that's exactly what it is. And we are listening.
It's
The
true.
#1 podcast in the world isn't, you don't shake a stick at that.
My cousin, I always say this as an example. My cousin, he's like quiet dude, real quiet dude. But when he talks, everybody goes, what did you say? Everybody listens. 'Cause he doesn't say anything. He didn't talk for the first 4 years of his life. And when he just started talking out of nowhere after 4 years, and his mother asked him one time, she's like, "What happened? How come you're talking now? And we thought that we didn't think you could talk." And he said, "I didn't have anything to say."
That's so
But
gangster.
yeah, but when he talks, people listen. That's actually a good probably a good life lesson if you're, not for us.
Not
Talk
for
all
us.
day.
We
Yeah.
talk a lot of nobody listens. My uncle was like that. I likened him to the Ents from Lord of the Rings, the tree people, was like he talked real slow when he did talk, but when he finally opened his mouth, it would like this bassy voice would crackle out and the room would go silent. And he would either do one of two things. He'd say something profoundly wise, or he'd go in a direction. You're like, where the fuck is this guy going? Boom, punchline, and he'd kill you. He'd kill you. He'd have something he's cooking on. He didn't give a fuck about rushing it out. It was a joke. It was a joke that he was saying to you, but he didn't care how uncomfortable it made you, that you didn't know where the fuck he was going, and you're getting frustrated with why he's talking so slow. And then all of a sudden, he'd say something, and you go, "Oh, this," and he'd kill us every time. But I mean, it's the only angle that I can think of, and that doesn't mean that it's true, guys. It doesn't mean that it's true. It's just like it fits too well because people have been talking about this forever. And now all of a sudden it's being treated like some scientific breakthrough. Now all of a sudden it's being attributed to, ideas of ascension or evolution or spiritual evolution or just the development of humanity overall. And it's like, this has been a thing. It's hilarious, isn't it? It's like we've always had oracles. We've always had shamans. Why are you saying that this is the next stage in human development?
Well, this is what the narrative needs to be. You need to first expose the level of you need to expose the nefarious actors that have been on the world stage doing this for, I don't know, almost a century. That's number one. If you don't catch that, you're behind the game. Number two, you have to understand that this is a concerted effort for them to present this to us in a way that is compelling. It pulls on your heartstrings. They're talking about love. Okay. Understand what they're presenting you, and don't just accept that. Don't take that because it feels good. It does feel good. Like these kids are, they have a life. They have
Imagine
a
being
voice.
their parents, right? They're finally
Oh,
talking
yeah.
to you.
No, listen, if it was my kid, I would be ecstatic over it, and I wouldn't want to hear any of this. But you'd be way too close to it. Then you have to understand that the technology that is right there that we've been working on is ready to set the table for whatever they want to roll out. It almost feels like the experiments being done on these children were done to understand how to develop the technology for the human brain that will soon be implanted in most, or if not all of us, if we're not careful. The selling point's already there, sort of, although people will still be, I think, like the first wave of people will take it and they'll think it's a great, great innovation for humanity. The second wave of people will probably take this thing because there's simply no way to compete.
You're getting left behind.
Yeah, I mean, that's like yeah, you're gonna get left behind. You're not gonna be able to buy or sell. It almost that's what it feels like. It's like experimentation. We figured out what we needed. Experimentation almost over. Now we're in a part of now we're at the phase where we're going to patent this idea. The next phase is going to be, how are we going to sell this to people? And it'll probably be free, but you have to get them to do it willingly. How can we get people to put this in their brain?
Well, that's it. So it's like you have these ancient entities, and because they are ancient, right? Puhara just talking to the Ennead. The Ennead is literally the individual names of the lowercase g gods that ruled over Egypt. So we know that these entities at least go that far. But given our research and our contention that these pantheons are actually just the fallen, that would then lead me to the suspicion that that's who these entities are. They're the fallen, and they are the dead Nephilim, their offspring. And so they're getting us to this point. They want us to have this message. In fact, it's been a message that countless people throughout the ages have received in one way, shape, or form by channeling some entities. And it's just, we're just not biting. We're just not listening. And so they use.
Did we lose David?
Oh, is that no? I'm
We
still here.
did.
Can you hear me?
Let's give him a sec. Go ahead. Say what you had to say there. You froze out.
What did I so I said
Channeling these entities.
What was that?
You said channeling these entities.
Oh, right. So they're channeling these entities, and And it's been a narrative for the longest time. As long as people have been channeling entities, it's been a very similar narrative. It's time to ascend and yada yada yada. And nobody's listening, so they use the ultimate victim class. I mean, it's just nobody trumps that. Nobody trumps the victimhood of children that are so far disenfranchised that they can't even, they don't have control of their bodies. It's horrifying. So there's this mass rollout. They go, oh, people are losing their connection to the spiritual realm. He can augment them, get some metal in them, and it'll help them tune into the frequencies that we exist on, right? The airwaves, the airwaves that the angels are on. And the message gets out by way of these nonverbal autists. So the question then becomes, what is going to happen? Is it real? Are we going to get a polar shift? Or is that just fear porn, ultimate manipulator, right? And I don't know. I don't necessarily think that it's going to happen. But somebody in the chat said something the other day. It was just like a flippant comment, but I was like, and that is, are they trying to avoid the tribulation? And so, well, that fits really well. That's what transhumanism is all about. These people don't want to face judgment. They don't want to die, right? A lot of them are in cahoots with ancient entities. And if these ancient entities can somehow avoid Judgment Day, avoid the tribulation, by way of, I don't know, linking themselves to somebody who's going to get off world and go to Mars or something like that, maybe, or if they can manufacture a solution, maybe that's what's coming, is a solution. Maybe once everybody's aware that something is coming, maybe then we'll be presented with and we figured out how to get past it. So that's my stuck point right now, is like, okay, I see what they're alluding to. I see the fears of the polar shift, and I see that the information is departed to them, or onto them, or imparted on them by these entities, and these entities are likely ancient, likely fallen angels. So there's a deception in there, but what's the nature of the deception? Does it mean that there is no polar shift that's coming? Does it mean that it is coming, and we're not meant to avoid it, that it is the tribulation, that the mountains will be flattened? You know what I'm getting at? And I don't know. I don't know. Honestly, I sort of lean towards them trying to escape the tribulation. And honestly, Crow showed us that there's something out there. And I don't know if that something plugs into this whole narrative.
Is there a certain amount of us that need to be spiritually awakened to open up, I don't know, for lack of better words, open up some sort of portal for these entities to communicate more efficiently? Because it's like, why would you want the whole world spiritually connected? That's kind of what this is. Like, even though the chip, or the autism, or even the idea of humanity waking up to these spiritual gifts and communicating, having like being able to go on something like the hill or traverse into this other dimension, there must be a reason why they want us all there or focused there. Maybe the same reason they want us all looking at our phone and not looking up,
Well, if you create like, your phone can create a hive mind in a way, where it's the great bridge between you and all these people who are scattered. And you have that, and then you have the telepathy. So you have technology, and you have telepathic communication. I wouldn't be surprised if through those two things you're recreating the Tower of Babel, right? Where everybody's consolidated, everybody speaks the same language. Maybe the point isn't to get to Mars. Maybe the point is to escape, just period. And if you can get us all on the same page, and you could show us something that's amazing, like telepathy, and while we're in a state of amazement, you can then tell us that there are benign entities who are trying to intervene on our behalf, then you may well be able to rally us all in a giant scramble to do what? fire up CERN and hop into a portal. I don't know. I don't think that it's going to be Mars, but
Well, you could
could-
you could rile up a bunch of people to, you know, do what it says in the Bible, where everybody will turn against God. You know, like the army against God will be like the number of grains of sand. And
right.
I don't know. I don't know where it goes, but there is definitely a concerted spiritual effort that people are missing when we're talking about this topic, the telepathy tapes, what they are, what's going on behind it, where it's
Mm.
leading to. Nobody's adequately addressing it. And I don't even think we are, but at least we're posing the question. We need somebody a little smarter to come take a look at this and tell us either what we're missing, what we're getting wrong, or where this is going. Where is it going?
I think what we've done here over these last 2 episodes and the appearances on other people's shows and then talking about it on our shows is we should have, I'm not saying you guys have to believe us. I'm not saying that we have even the answers for it, but we should have laid out enough odd correlations and questions for people to stop and go like, wait, what the is going on? And that's all I'm asking for people is just to ask what the is going on, because this is being painted as hope and truth and love and all these different things, but for some reason it's surrounded by horror. It's surrounded by trauma, dissociative identity disorders, entities that are communicating with you, and when they're not communicating with you, they're using biomechanical entities to kidnap you and impregnate you, and there's a hybridization program, and this dude wants to put some shit in your head. This should all make you go, wait.
Kids drowning in bathtubs. It's like, ugh, dude.
Something is wrong here. And I don't exactly know what it is. We just have a lot of questions, and you know, I'm glad that we got it out. It may not be the hard hitting conclusion that people, but for us to give you some hard hitting conclusion would have been a lie. We can only give you what we suspect, and we can only show you what we've seen, and hopefully somebody smarter than us hears this and comes back to us, which, by the way, I've gotten a lot of that. Somebody literally sent me, somebody who works at a funeral home or crematorium, wherever you burn the bodies, found an implant on someone's tooth that somehow survived it, and it's very bizarre and it's very interesting, and they sent me a picture and were telling me about it. And you know, so I'm hoping to start a conversation here, and don't listen to the Ian Carrolls of the world or anybody else who gives you a canned response and tells you that they know what this thing is. We don't know what this thing is. We're just asking questions, and these questions are pretty alarming. And I'm through the questions, we're painting a picture, and I don't know if that picture is real, but what I'm seeing so far is it's concerning. So I don't know if you guys have any ideas. Feel free to reach out. Feel free to send it our way. If you know of another content creator who has pieces of the puzzle that we don't have, let us know. Send them our way. We've had a couple people do that already. I think this conversation is going to organically evolve over time, and maybe we'll get some answers. But for now, I just have a lot of questions.
To address Jeep, no, it doesn't make me scared. None of this makes me scared. I just want to know. We want to know where this is going, so I can be positioned correctly to either avoid it or profit off of it.
and even if it's a polar shift, whatever, and we're all gonna die. Well, I guess we're all gonna die then, and I'm not really so worried about that. And I do believe that whatever goes on, heaven is much longer of a time than our time here on Earth. So no, I don't have any fear at all. I think our suffering here is not meaningless, but it is not the great devastation that we often feel like it is while we're in this realm. Right. I think that we'll get to a place after this and we'll look back and we'll go, that was crazy. That was crazy.
I look forward to reviewing all this stuff and really packaging it well, because we're going to be on Tinfoil Hat again at the end of this month to present this, but we're going to present it we have to present it in a meaningful way, one that will like pose the correct questions, and hopefully to an audience of that size, we can get some response about what people think and what's coming back. That's really what we're after here. We're not after I don't know, this like it's a Trojan horse of Ascension. That's not what I want. It's not what I think is even going to happen. There's something here. But
and look, I know we got to wrap it up, but Rick says, I'm feeling like this whole thing is manufactured by the CIA, like we're being steered to discuss this topic, and I would say there's certainly an element of that. Certainly 100%. An element of that. So I don't know what that means. To me, that means that narrative is But the question then becomes, what part is it that it's not going to happen, or that it is going to happen? It's going to be the tribulation, and these motherfuckers are trying to avoid it. I don't know. I'm just saying. Lots more questions than answers, but I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I hope that you found it as fascinating as we found it fascinating, because this has been gripping us for the better part of like 2 months now. And it's been good to get it out, but we're still not done. Obviously, we got to try to present this on a couple other shows and things like that. But I don't know. Let us know what you think in the comments, and let us know if you have a piece of the puzzle, and also let us know if there's any other content creators out there that you think might have something that we don't have, and that we can collaborate and try to figure this out. Because all I'm interested in is the truth and the information. And if it seems like the truth, I'm going to move towards it. And if that means trying to dispel it or prove it that it is real, then so be it. So I'd be interested in doing some crossovers. But that's kind of it. That's all we got. I know a lot of you guys are probably tired of hearing it. It's not going to stop. Sorry. We now got to go on other podcasts, and we got to talk about it even more. But at least here on Nephilim Death Squad, we've got it out of our system. So you can look forward to the next episodes about whatever the hell we're going to talk about.
I'm sure much of the same. But until then.
I don't want to say it. You say it. I didn't say it. Last time I said it, and it wasn't
I was going to say it. I was making people wait.
Okay.
Obey, submit, comply.
The greatest hypnotist on planet Earth is a oblong box in the corner of the room. It is constantly telling us what to believe is real.
You can persuade them that what they see with their eyes is what there is to see. You can't. Because they'll laugh in the face of an explanation that portrays the bigger picture of what's happening. And they have.